class voters. Study more about Paul Nuttall, should we, being elected as the new UKIP leader. 63% of the vote, pretty impressive. He beat Suzanne Evans and John Rhys-Evans, no relation. The MEP for North West England said it was up to UKIP to hold the government to account. But with a single MP, a punch-up in the European Parliament and 2 leadership elections in just a few months, will UKIP really be able to replace Labour in line with the new leader's ambitions? We're asking, is UKIP still relevant, or does it no longer have a place in British politics? Joining us to discuss this is the editor of politics.co.uk, Ian Dunt, and the blogger and co-founder of Nova Media, Aaron Bastani. Hello to you both. Thank you for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Ian, to you, first of all, if I may, how relevant is UKIP?
Well, they're extremely relevant in that they may not actually have any people in government, but they are in power. The policy platform that Theresa May has put forward, and in fact, more than that, the way that she talks about politics, the manner in which she talks about politics, the words that her and her ministers use, are an entire reflection of UKIP. I mean, they have taken the UKIP programme and installed it in the heart of Downing Street. Now, the party itself has struggled, and I think one of the reasons it struggled since the referendum is because it has seen all of its principles and all of its convictions get transposed unilaterally into Downing Street. And yet, there is enough of a mood out there for it to recalibrate itself. So it's winning in terms of values. And there's really nothing to stop it succeeding as a political force either.
Mr. Bastani, your response?
Yep, I agree with much of what Ian's just said. I mean, by way of context, the figures are, I think, around 15,000 people voted in the UKIP leadership election. Mr. Nuttall got 9,600. Context for that is, of course, the Labour leadership. 250,000 people, I think, voted for Jeremy Corbyn. I think 600,000 people participating. Even in internal elections, NEC elections over the summer, you've got people that have got in excess of 100,000 votes. That's more than 10 times what Paul Nuttall got. So there's potential for UKIP to make political capital out of post-Brexit Britain, out of Labour moving left under Corbyn. I think it's far from inevitable. In fact, I think under Nuttall, I'd say it's unlikely.
What does it need to become, though, as a party? Because, I mean, if you think about what they've achieved, they've been incredibly successful, but they're busted flush now because we're going to leave the European Union. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways here. I mean, the first one is exactly as you're pointing out. They need to be, you know, real Brexit, basically. So it doesn't matter what Theresa May comes back with. She could pull us out of the single market, the customs union, the EU, all terror sort of cooperation. She could pull us out of the WTO, and it wouldn't make any difference to these guys. UKIP, for it to survive tactically, has to say that they're failing to deliver on the Brexit promise, that they're seeking a weak Brexit that will keep us close to the EU. It doesn't matter what she does. That is invariably what UKIP's message will be. So that'll be one part of it. The second part of it, I'm afraid, is even more dark than that, really. And that's that I think UKIP will notice that there is a market for a racialized form of right-wing authoritarian politics. And they are likely to pursue that market very aggressively indeed. And I suspect that that's the manner in which he will handle the politics over the years to come.
Aaron?
Well, no, I couldn't agree more again. I think he looks and sounds like a carbon copy of the kinds of right-wingers you see on the continent. Anti-abortion, wants more free market in regards to the NHS, has said very bizarre things around Islam. He believes that there's a conspiracy, effectively, to create a demographic majority of Muslims in the continent of Europe. So, yes, he sounds very much like Geert Wilders. He sounds very much like people around Lega Nord in Italy 10, 15 years ago. This is a European-style right-winger, and I wouldn't call him a conservative. I would even probably not call him an ultra-nationalist. The things he's saying around Islam and women's reproductive rights in particular, I think marks him out as particularly hostile to modernity. Very, very odd character in the context of UK electoral politics.
Ian, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, in fact, looking at some of his policies, I mean, it's pure Trump. It's pure the sort of far right, the sort of elements of neo-fascism that you see in Europe. This sort of sense of, I mean, really what these guys are is their identity politics, but their identity politics of the right. So their identity politics for, you know, straight white men, basically. It seems like that is a very compelling message all over Europe, in America, and even possibly in the UK. And the UK to a slightly lesser extent, or at least it looks like the polls show that way. But it's potential that there is a market there for him to pick up. He is entirely in keeping with what we've seen in Europe and in America. And he's the sort of thing that we would expect to see now from UKIP as well. And that's exactly what they provided us with.
But it's not, Aaron, it's not straight white men that generally vote, is it? It's women and it's other people who don't fall into that category. So where will their support come from? Is it Labour strongholds who are so disillusioned, a little bit like the Rust Belt that we saw in the United States, and they're the ones that will offer the support?
I mean, that's the story that Paul Nuttall will tell the media. It's what he'll tell his membership, and it's a plausible story. You know, it's not impossible. And there is precedent recently with the United States, the Rust Belt, the path by which Donald Trump won the White House is now the president-elect. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen because, as you've said, yes, white men are a very large part of the electorate, but it's not a social majority. What's up to Labour now, I think, is the extent to which they can cohere around the present leadership, the extent to which they can really come down on UKIP, particularly in those northern seats. We saw UKIP come astonishing result, second in 121 seats, I believe, most of them in the north. Labour really has to make sure they make no further inroads. For my money, I think that Paul Nuttall is the worst candidate for UKIP to do that. I think Stephen Wolfe, who left the party after being assaulted by two of his colleagues in Brussels or Strasbourg.
Allegedly, let's throw that in there, thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, allegedly assaulted. He then left. I think he would have made a much better candidate because he would really synthesise the Tory, disenchanted Tory southern base and northern working class voters. Very difficult to get a political leader who can bring both together. Farage did that over the Leave campaign. Let's be clear, Farage was a very, very, very effective politician. I think the most effective Conservative politician of his generation. Big shoes to fill. I don't think Paul Nuttall can do it.
Okay, why not a woman, Ian? Why do you think that they turned away so vehemently against a woman leading the party? I think she lost her deposit, didn't she?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was an anti-woman thing that Suzanne Evans didn't get it. I mean, she's okay. I kind of think, to be honest, her value has been slightly spoken rather than higher than it actually is. I mean, she's okay, but she does look like a career politician. She does look like a Tory, and she talks pretty much in that manner. You know, we were doing a little bit better before with James, but again, it just seems like UKIP is such an infighty party. I'm not sure that it's particularly misogynistic in the way that it treats its own female MPs. It's just a party that can't help but fight itself. It's been this way since forever, really. I mean, when it was a very small party, you'd have UKIP organisers that would tell you, well, look, we only have these problems because we're a small party, we're all in the same room together, so it's easier for big personalities to clash. The truth is, a few years past, they get into a bigger party, and they're exactly the same. The only thing that really held them together was Nigel Farage going through what looked like an election-winning course. It didn't turn out that way in terms of Westminster. It did turn out that way in terms of the referendum. Whether they're going to be willing to give someone the chance to establish their base and try and recreate that success is another matter entirely. It's perfectly possible the party will continue to tear itself apart in the months to come.
Yeah, and maybe recreated into a different sort of party. Depends what Aaron Banks wants to do with his chequebook, I suppose. Aaron, final thought from you. How do you see UKIP looking after the next election?
Well, there's no doubt about it. There's huge potential there for UKIP. I think there are a certain set of conditions under which they could build on those 4 million votes, 4 million plus votes they got at the last general election. I think they could get 6 million, 8 million. That would depend on a couple of things. Firstly, the other parties cohering around a centrist consensus. The opposite has happened. Theresa May's gone right, taking many of their members with her. Labour's gone left with Jeremy Corbyn. Not old Labour, not new Labour, but what they'll say is real Labour. That will mean that UKIP can't peel off as many of those left-leaning traditional Labour voters as they wanted. In addition to that, I don't think they've got the personnel. And Aaron Banks has only been involved in politics for a couple of years. He's got some money, sure, but his track record isn't that extensive. I think they would like to repeat the success of Trump, and it's possible, but I think it's highly unlikely. But you know what? It's up to the left and it's up to the Conservatives to go out to persuade people to win those seats.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.